be able to invite Professor Ashok Swain, who teaches at Uppsala University in Sweden. He will talk about today water and international conflicts, implications for Northeast Asia. And also, we are very happy to be able to invite visiting Professor Kim Sang-hyuk as moderator of our special seminar. Let me introduce Professor Kim Sang-hyuk first. He is a visiting professor at Graduate School of Green Growth College of Business Heights and chairman of Coalition for Our Common Future, a NGO group. Prior to joining the KITE in 2013, Professor Kim has worked at the Office of the President of the Republic of Korea from 2008 as the Secretary for National Future and Vision, where he contributed in setting the historic low-carbon green growth vision for Korea. In 2011, he became the Senior Secretary to the President for Green Growth, coordinating the planning, developing, and implementing of Korea's green growth strategy. Through collaboration with the Presidential Committee on Green Growth and relevant ministries, his agenda ranges from national implementation of green growth policies to international climate change negotiations and promoting global cooperation for making green growth a truly global asset. Moreover, he served as a member of the Global Agenda Council of World Economic Forum, and now he also serves as a co-chairman of Jeju Green Big Bang Committee. So, as you see, he is a man of green growth in South Korea. Even though the Kim Myung-bak presidency was over, his agenda of green growth remains very important for the future of our country, Korea. So, we are very happy to be able to invite him to this. So now you're
well. Thank you very much for your kind and even lengthy introduction. But it is not me, but Professor Swain who is the main actor for today's session. But as gentlemen raised a kind of curiosity, it is Donald Trump who made my hair green. It is my full commitment to combat climate change. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, Dr. Hong, and everyone. And it is my real pleasure to be here with such a distinguished scholar. Well, as you know, we live in a watery planet. We live on a watery planet. We also have a watery body, right? Maybe that's why we take water for granted. But without water, we cannot make a living, simply speaking. And also, actually, billions of people are living without without clean drinking water, and millions of people are dying from water-related diseases. And the climate change, which I believe the biggest challenge of our time, is making matters much, much worse than before. And according to the Global Risk Report that is annually published by the World Economic Forum, or known as Davos Forum, water crisis will be the biggest global risk in 10 years' time. And we would expect much more severe conflicts over water security among nations. And that could be true. That could be applicable to Korean Peninsula, where we share some rivers, such as Imjingang, with North Korea, more than that, we also experience severe, even unprecedented drought these days, these years in Korea. So it is most timely and valuable for us to invite Professor Ashok Swain of Uppsala University, Sweden. Uppsala University is one of the most prestigious and oldest university in the Scandinavian countries. And Professor Ashok Swain has been a leading scholar in environmental conflict and peace building, especially climate change and transboundary water conflict management. So please join me welcoming him with big hands. Professor Swain will deliver his lecture or speech in about 40 minutes, and then we will have around 20 or 30-minute interaction. So we would welcome any questions. Okay, thank you.
Is it okay? I can sign it in. Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure and honor to be here. This is the first time I've been to Seoul, so I thought, and I thank you for inviting me to give this talk, and thank you, Professor Kim, he just disappeared, for giving a generous introduction. I will be trying to, as you know, I mean, being a professor, we don't have any limit to how long we speak. So I will try to limit myself and stay within the time, and I hope someone will at least tell me when to stop. The one thing which I'm quite, last week I became the UNESCO chair on international water cooperation. So after being the UNESCO chair, so this is my first visit abroad to do this. So I also feel, happy to be here and speak about the water issue which I'm working on. Professor Kim gave an introduction of the challenges, at least the way the water issue is affecting the world or as becoming a threat. I will try to just tell you a few facts, and before we move into the transboundary or international river management. If you look at the last century, the population moved from 2 billion to 6 billion. So the population got tripled in 1 century. But at the same time, our renewable water resource, particularly the fresh water resource, has grown 6-fold. So we always say if there are more people, there will be more water will be used. It's not only the more people are using more water, also we individually, because we are becoming developed, the development also uses much more water. So our number of population has only got 3 times, whereas our water use have gone 6 times. While you in Seoul, you will enjoying nice water from the tap, which I find it's absolutely good, though I also come from Sweden, where I also am proud of getting the tap water. A country, actually, a character of a country is, or a character of a city is very important when you can really go and open the tap and drink the water. Not the skyscrapers, this the tap water is a basic thing a city should provide. Whereas 1.1 billion people are living without clean drinking water. I mean, it's not the quality of water which are talking about the whole city provides us. Even the basic water which comes in the tap, 1.1 billion people don't get it. 2.6 billion people lack adequate sanitation. That's a huge number. That's 2 out of 5 people in the world do not have the sanitations in the world. There are 5 million people, 1.8 million children die every year from water-related diseases. We talk a lot of conflict-related diseases. I'm not undermining the violent conflict and the people dying with it. In Uppsala, particularly the department where I come from, we have a Uppsala conflict database, which is quite famous for looking at the conflicts taking place all over the world. But there we calculate each conflict which causes 25 deaths. But look at this. Water-related deaths never get into that kind of data set. It's 5 million people are dying every year because of the water-related diseases. We need to also see that the average daily water use in the south, 10 liters. WHO predicts, says that at least I'm talking about the water used for the drinking, for sanitation, and for cooking purposes. Supposed to be 25, 30 liters to 50 liters, depending on which area you live in. Whereas in the southern countries, in the developing, particularly in Africa, where the water is not scarce, I'm talking about Eastern Africa and West Africa, where plenty of water is there, the people only use 10 liters of water. In South Korea, 282 liters. So, per day. So, and that number is also increasing. And there is not a big difference between the salt and in the regular, interior part of the country. So it's quite almost 282 to 286 liters are being used every day. Before moving into the water scarcity issue, there is a physical water scarcity and the economic water scarcity. There are some countries in the world, they have physical water scarcity. Countries like Middle East, or part of Southern Africa, countries like South Africa, or the the North Africa. These are the regions which has less water physically. But there are countries, those who are economically water scarce, like eastern part of Africa or western part of Africa. There is plenty of water God has given them, but the government has failed to give them to the people. As I was saying, only 10 liters of water in most of the countries people get. So it's an uneven water availability between the different regions, and also disparity in economic, institutional, and technological strength. If you have the institutional strength and technology, you can possibly get the people the water. And also we need to know that many of these countries in the south, they are agricultural-based economy, and agriculture needs much more water than the industrial use. And the industrial use, the water gets polluted, where the agricultural use, the water goes out. And we don't know whether it will come back or not. It depends on whether the cloud is coming here. But industrial use, you can easily fix it if you have the technology and the willingness to fix it. There is an increasing water demand, population growth we talked about, which is 95% taking place in the developing countries, which are actually looking at water demand quite, or water scarcity quite well, and urbanization. So, water pollution, which was an issue before in the west or the north, now it has become an issue in the south. It's a period which we move from being developed to developed, and that's a very critical period. Look at South Korea. It didn't have a single sewerage line in the 1958. Now almost the whole country, it's almost 100%. By 2012, which is 90% of its wastewater is being treated. It's a huge, huge change. It's the same like a country where I come from, Sweden, which we have the paper and pulp industry. In the 1960s, the amount of water the Swedish paper and pulp industries were using, that has gone down to 3 times less. But the production has gone 6 times more. It's because we can use the technology and the pollution is almost zero. So the paper and pulp industries are proudly claiming that there is pollution has almost come to zero. So these are the possibilities in the beginning when the industrialization or development taking place, how to manage it, how to do it, that we don't really make a big problem. But of course, after you bring developed, there will be a certain stage where we realize that we can able to treat the water.
So can I understand what is the sewer line?
The sanitation and treatment of the toilets and
Treatment the lines.
yeah. Why we worry about, when you're talking about the water, why we worry about international rivers? What is the way? I mean, because we only know few international rivers. Everybody, just the Nile or the Rhine or Danube or the Colorado. I mean, these are the few rivers we talk about. But actually, there are plenty of international rivers, on which we are dependent on the water in the world is dependent. There are 276 first order, the major international rivers, and that covers 45% of Earth's land surface. More than that, it supports 40% of 40% plus. It's actually increasing because it's mostly in the developing countries. Its world population is dependent on the water which is not the domestic rivers. These are all international rivers. These are the statistics. 48 countries have some share in international river system. 39 of them, the 90% of their territory is in this basin. So imagine, almost 40 countries of the world, their whole country is dependent on the international water. And there is no magic formula in governing international rivers. There is no formula on that, how to do it. I will come back to it. There is some convention which has been ratified, I will come back to it. But that ratification or that convention is not good enough. There is no formula in it how to address it. And there is a changing geopolitics and climate uncertainties, which two factors which you need to look at it. There are rivers are being, most international rivers are the major carrier of the fresh water. We don't have any formula, we don't have any kind of international law as such which can really find a possible solution how that will be governed. Then we have the climate change is taking place, how that will affect the existing sharing and the changing geopolitics. The world is not the same as it used to be before. That used to be in the 1990s when I started working on the water issue. I started working on water issue 92 after my PhD, and the world has changed extremely differently. I mean, which some of you are very young, the people who worked in the Cold War period, they know that how that has come in, and with that, how that is going to take place and how that is going to change. Number of international river basins in the world. Who is jumping? Is there no. The Africa, 64 per international rivers. Africa has many international rivers. There is a 1978, the register, the UN had created a register where 57. Why? I mean, why these international rivers or numbers are changing? Because of course, it's not that the countries are, some countries have become one, become two, two become one, and that might change also in this part of the world sometime soon. But that has also changed in quite a number in Africa and in Europe. So that you can see the number has moved to 64. But also, before our satellites positioning was, our satellite system was not that a good calculation that where the water is coming. Now we can see many of the international rivers which were not technically international rivers before. So there you can see Africa, Asia, Europe, these are the dominating in the number of international rivers in a sense. There are 276. There are many, but the country like Turkmenistan, I mean, that's a smaller country, is a kind of strange country, but it's 98% of its water coming from outside. Means the 98% of its water supply doesn't origin in its part of the country. It comes from the upstream. Egypt, 97, because depending on Nile. That's a Euphrates Tigris. Sorry, that's a Amundarya Sildiria. Sorry, that's a moving Turkmenistan Amundarya Sildiria. Hungary, 95, Mauritania, 95. Look at these countries. I mean, there are some of the big countries like Uzbekistan, Netherlands, Cambodia, Syria, Congo, 80%. These are the countries, more than 80% of their water is not in their hand. Means they are dependent on the mercy of the upstream countries. If they get mad, then their water supply is in danger. And that creates a security challenge for these countries to be allowed to at least to feel comfortable or to feel secure about their water supply, which will come or not. There have been some lessons we have learned. There has been no war yet. Of course, everybody talks about water war. You know, people talk about water war. It has been very casually has been used from the 1980s. There will be water war. We haven't seen countries fighting against each other yet for the water directly. I mean, because nobody knows why countries fight. To be honest, I mean, I'm a professor in peace and conflict research. If you ask me why country X fight with Y, I won't have a single answer, to be honest, because there are different reasons countries fight. But nobody has taken water as the reason for fighting against another country. Agreements have worked. There have been many agreements on these rivers. They have worked in some of the countries. Particularly a country, two countries, you know, they are as nice as anyone else, India, Pakistan. They have an agreement since 1960 over the river Indus, and that the World Bank had negotiated that agreement. So they have fought 3 to 4 wars. After that, the agreements have continued to work. So agreements have not collapsed till now. There have been, but though this looks good, but there has been internal violent conflicts has increased over the water. So though the countries haven't fought against one another, but over the international shared waters within the country, the conflicts have done, because there is less water, so the groups within the countries are fighting. Then the threat to development, because water is also key to any development in the society, is the human security. It's a larger development as well as human security, and that is being affected. So though there has not been any war yet, but internally there has been conflicts, and it is affecting the development as such. Let's look at the climate change. I mean, you can stop me, because if I'm moving faster, please stop me. Otherwise, I will come back when we will discuss. Because I just want to give you the overview, and I will come back to this. The climate change is being discussed quite a lot in the media, has brought the issue to the forefront of the global debate in the nice way or in the wrong way, depending on who is leading, because we had such hope last year and no hope this year, but it's all happens to up and down. But I have not lost hope. But the climate change is a big threat. Whatever the projections are, if 97% people we believe, the scientists we believe, it is a serious crisis will be there, and it will affect the water availability in the river system. It will affect the timing because of the precipitation. The timing will change, the precipitation period will change, the demand for water will change. It will be in a sort of different period of time, so that will create challenges, particularly for the rivers, where, when and how much of water it is carrying, and on the different time period. Because if you look at it, the different climate change projections, the first 40 years of the next 100 years will be different than the other 30 years, than the last 30 years. So if you are planning for a dam or planning for an agreement for 100 years, we have to switch, because it's not the business as usual. Because what is happening now will not be the same after 40 years, because the things might be different. Different precipitation will come, different water flow will come. That will lead to that is more, because most of these dams which are, or most of the rivers, where do you build the dams? The dams are being built in the, I will come back to the Himalayas, but many of those big, where the snow mountains, where you build the dams, because that's where you keep the water, but that will be high floods and glacial lake outbursts will create problems. Problems of planning water development projects, because we don't know when and how much of water will be available. If we don't know how to plan that and how to make the dams construction, because if you look at the countries have signed the agreement on the rivers on the basis of getting more water. Because all the agreements have been signed in the expectation that their country will get more water, where they will build more dams. So if you have a problem of planning more dams or building more dams, how you will agree for an agreement? You don't need to. The countries will not go for agreement. The doubts over its suitability to act as an international boundary. Many of the rivers act as an international boundary, because that's where the marking up is. And if the river, because of the change in the precipitation, changing in the river flow, if the river starts moving, then it becomes a major problem, because it becomes because your boundary, or you lose the border. Look at the Mekong River. What is happening now, China is trying to clean it up, cleaning the soil to make it navigational. Who is getting mad at this? The Thai army. Why Thai army has to be mad at it? Because the river, if you take out the soil, the river starts moving and it's taking it to Thai territory. And because the river, if you change the river water flow of either taking out the soil or climate change related issues, the river will move. And if that will move, then we will have existing international boundaries in many parts of the world will be under threat. Existing water sharing arrangements may come under threat. And that will be an extremely critical issue, because most of the rivers where we thought that we have found some sort of agreements, these agreements might break whatever the existing among the different riparian countries, because these riparian countries, when they signed the agreement, they did not take the climate change related uncertainties. Because if you look at this, many of these agreements, it depends which week of the year, how much of water will give it to country X, how much of country will country given to Y. So if there is a 1 year a drought or 2 years drought, they have certain measures how to adjust it. But if you have a long term, which we see 40, 50 years of changes, then they don't have that. So either they have to re-sign the agreement, which will be a much more difficult process, or the agreement will collapse. And we are looking at the serious crisis over these agreements. And the one which I told you, the Indus Treaty 1960, is the major success story which World Bank claims all over since last few years, particularly from last year, is under serious threat. The Himalayan glaciers. Look at this, what is happening. This is where we have 7 largest Asian rivers. 1.2 billion people are dependent on this river system. And all are coming from Tibetan Plateau. And that's in China. I mean, depending on how much Tibetan politics you want to do, but that is actually Chinese control. How shall we do this? Because the thing is, all these rivers, China has been, of course, taking care of its own internal rivers, yellow rivers are there. But the Mekong, main ones, Ni, the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Indus. China hasn't signed a single agreement on transboundary water with any country in the world. China has refused to sign an agreement. I'm not saying China has been behaving quite nastily with everybody, but China hasn't got any agreement signed yet. China refuses to sign the agreement, and that creates almost all these countries quite scared, because what will happen? Because China has kept that control within it, that it can really act in a way which might create a water crisis for the countries. Take for example, now the Southeast Asia, as I was saying, Mekong, there is a Mekong River Commission of the 4 lower riparian countries, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand, but the China and Burma, or you call it Myanmar, those who have not been signed. But the Myanmar is interested to sign it, but the China keeps not, is a part of this whole commission as an observer, but hasn't signed the agreement. China has already built the dams. The new river, which goes through the Burma, China had stopped building dams on the upstream, but now China has started again building the dams. The Brahmaputra, which is the yellow, and then becomes the Brahmaputra, which comes to India and Bangladesh, China has almost building 5 dams here. Of course, these dams have been built, these are hydropower dams. So, hydropower dams keep the water up there. But it hasn't really taken away the water from the system. So the countries are wondering if China has a plan to put that in the south and north pipeline, because south from China is diverting the water to the south and north. And if China does that, these countries will be in serious trouble. And China, if it wants to, it will do it. So this is, and then the India-Pakistan, when the Pakistan-India has signed the agreement, because I'm coming back to the Indus, why? Because that is a very, because the world community, particularly World Bank, takes a lot of pride of getting this Indus agreement signed. So the agreement is signed between India and Pakistan. Of course, Afghanistan and China are other 2 riparians. When India threatened Pakistan last year that we will stop the water, but the Indian water is also coming from the Pakistan water coming from the Indian administered Kashmir. That's also a controversial area. But the China is upstream. China has already started building 1 dam and planning another dam. So China said, hey, I'm upstream. So what you are doing there? So, and then once India was threatening to Pakistan, China started filling up a dam on the Brahmaputra this side. So this is a big game going on this level. So, and once the climate change affects it, what I was telling, in some cases, China also taking the help of climate change to build more dams. Because China is saying, because China had stopped building the dam on the New, because of it was going into UNESCO heritage site, so they wanted to, the previous president and prime minister, they stopped it, but now the Xi administration wants to build it. The idea is, because the China says this is carbon friendly, okay? So because you are saying us to move from the coal, what we will do? So we have to build the dam. So for the climate change, we are building dams, or China is building the dams. Then there was some, because China was filling up an upstream dam in the Mekong basin, there was less water coming to the downstream Mekong River. So Mekong River basin complained in 2010, I think. And China said, because of the climate change, there is less precipitation. So there is less water coming to the river. Actually, they are filling up the dam. The next year, the dam got filled up because that year. The next year, there is more water, so they needed to, because they kept more water, so they need to release more water. So they become clogged again. So, and that was because of the dam mismanagement of the upstream dam. So when the lower riparian countries complained to China, saying that, hey, there is more water coming now because there is a climate change, because it's a precipitation, there's more precipitation. So, countries are also taking advantage of climate change, the misusing of the climate change to do their jobs here. This is China doing the same politics, India doing the same politics at the middle level. So it's not that anyone is a good one in there. So they're all misusing their geographical position, the science, and the control over the water for their own benefits. What we are seeing, most of the existing agreements, they have been mostly favored the powerful riparian countries. That's a wrong spelling. I'm sorry about that. Riparian is wrongly spelled. The existing agreement, what has happened, if you look at all these agreements, water agreements have been signed, who is the powerful country in the basin has always taken the more share. It has never been fair in the world. So that's what you can't really move into a new water kind of security if you are talking about existing agreement. The existing agreements has to change to give the water, share the water equitably. Otherwise, the upstream riparian, the powerful riparians, as I was mentioning, China is not part of any agreement. But in the case of India, the Bangladesh is suffering because India has the upper hand in the agreement as well. And there is a political and economic changes, extend, narrow the power difference. There have been many countries, the new power groups have come. Like take for example in the Nile. In the Nile, Ethiopia used to give 86, because Nile, Blue Nile and White Nile join at Khartoum, becomes the Nile and goes to the Cairo and then goes to the sea. So Blue Nile only provides 14% of Nile water. 86% comes from Blue Nile provides 86% of the water, White Nile provides the rest. So Blue Nile comes from the Blue Nile, Atal and Somat, they come from the Ethiopia. Ethiopia provides 86% of the water of the Nile, but is not party to any agreement. Ethiopia only using 4% of its water availability, only 4%. And Ethiopia's population is increasing. Ethiopia has been, whenever we see a child malnutrition and hunger, our image of an Ethiopian famine comes into our mind. So Ethiopia needs this water for its food security. But Ethiopia has not been part of any agreement to use the Nile water. And in the developed part of the world, West stopped refusing to Ethiopia giving money to build dams, because it will make power instability for Egypt. Because we wanted Egypt to keep continuing to use that water for long. But now Ethiopia has power, because Ethiopia is the fastest growing economy in Africa. Ethiopia has a strong diaspora. Ethiopia is continuing to build dam, and China has come in. So China factor has changed the dynamics also in Ethiopia. China factor has changed dynamics in most of the river basins in Africa as well, positively and negatively. If I have time, I will come back to it in the why I see. In Nile, I see China's role has been positive because I think Ethiopia has been not given its due for centuries, which it is due is, and it is now using that water. Whereas in other basins, the upper hegemons, the hegemons like Nigeria or the hegemons like Zambia, hegemons in the other basins or Ghana in the, so they are actually being much more hegemonic now with the Chinese help as well. So there are two different ways we are seeing this. Some agreements have been to increase water supply with the Western World Bank support, but that has not been going on. As I said, there was creating problem, and China emerges as a new actor. China's support, as I was mentioning, to build their infrastructure and also power, balance of power in the basin. Because most of these African countries are in the, particularly what happened in the before Cold War, if West was not giving money, the Soviets were giving the money. Look at what happened in the Lake Nasser, Aswan Dam was being built. That time Egypt got into conflict with the Suez Canal crisis, if you remember. So the USA and the UK had promised the money to give it to Egypt to build the dam. They said, hey, we are not going to build the dam because we are not going to give the money. So Egypt went to Soviets. Soviets gave the money. But that possibilities went away since 1990. So the Africans didn't have any alternative. But for the last 10 years, China has provided an alternative. It's a good thing and bad thing, again, because that providing that alternative is who is using that alternative. It depends on the country, it depends on the leadership, because Africa is not one country. Africa has 50 plus countries, and African different leaders, different political system uses that opportunity either for them or for their people or for their country. And depending on that basis, we have seen the differences. I have 15 minutes or something? No?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. I was telling that there is no international principle how to use the water. Actually, there is a convention now which has been ratified only 3 years back, which is called Convention on the Law of Non-Navigational Use of International Watercourse, which was adopted in the United Nations General Assembly in 97. This negotiation has been going on since 1960. From Helsinki Convention to now, it has gone on to 1997. The UN General Assembly first time adopted it. And when from 1960 to 97, this discussion was going on, always in the General Assembly, the voting was taking place. The voting was not taking, the voting pattern in the General Assembly was not that who belongs to the NATO or the American support West, who belongs to the East or Soviet supporter. It was on the who is upstream and who is in the downstream. So the whole voting system was on the water issue was never on politics but on the geographical location. But first time they put together few things because they wanted to have a convention. To make it a convention, at least there is a formula. So they put 2 or 3 principles in this which are completely contradictory to each other. One of them I will tell you. One, Article 5 says that the water will be shared equitably. Means not on the basis of your demand but on the basis of need, the water should be shared between 2 countries. The Article 7 at the same time says not to cause significant harm to the previous use. Means if you are using historically the water, so you have the possibility to use the water. How on earth, historically if you are using more water, because of course the upper riparian or most of the cases who are more powerful are using more water. So you can achieve the equitable use because always the lower riparian will be so low. But lower riparian got happy because they saw equitable use. Upper riparian got happy because they saw no significant harm to the previous use. They all voted for it. Those who didn't vote for it, Turkey, China and Burundi. Turkey is the upstream Euphrates Tigris system. China is always against any water discussion, even in that. China didn't do it. Burundi, no one knows. Somebody says that's a by mistake they pushed the button of the against it, so no one knows what happened. But South Korea had voted in favor. But you need 35 countries to ratify it. Since '97, the ratification process went very slow. Only 2014, mostly the small countries and island countries have ratified it. The South Korea hasn't ratified it yet. The only country in the Asia, if we don't include Middle East, Syria has ratified it, and the only country in Asia which has ratified is Vietnam, because that is the furthest downstream of the Mekong system. That's why it has ratified it. But as I said, if ratified, this will not provide the answer to the transboundary river conflict, because it has, we call it, it's a basket full of Halloween candy. It's everyone, because that's what attracted, everybody thought, oh, this candy I would like. The other groups saw the other candy they would like. So it is a law, a convention which is there without any, it cannot really solve any problem. I'm not saying that it's totally useless, but it doesn't make any sense, particularly the conflicts which are intractable. Sharing of international river discourse, immediate post-Cold War period, everybody talked about water war. In the second half of the 1990s, rivers become the source of bilateral and regional cooperation and water peace because agreements were signed. Jordan, Mekong, Ganges, Nile and the Zambezi, these were the rivers. In the 1990s, we all talked about they will create conflict when we started. And when they signed the agreement, Jordan got signed the agreement, is a part of the peace agreement in 94, Mekong in 95, Ganges 96, Nile 99, Zambezi 95, 96 something. So when these rivers signed this agreement, then we thought, oh, this will be peace. But all these discourse or discussion in the academics, the few questioned the quality of the river agreements. They didn't realize. Because these agreements, though these are agreements we say on these rivers, but they are not signed among all the riparian countries. They are only signed between few riparian countries. These are all, or in this case, few cases, they have been mostly among those limited riparian countries. They are not comprehensive. They haven't really led to the larger, and as I was mentioning, the climate change related uncertainties. So it's the discourse has been proved to be quite problematic now in the new context. What will happen? Which are countries, which are rivers which we are looking at the more conflicts now, if you want to see. There will be worsening of existing river conflicts, Tigris, Euphrates, Amu Darya, Sev Darya. Tigris, Euphrates, which comes from Ethiopia, then goes down to the Syria, Iraq, Iran has also 10%. So it has all the ingredients. And now it's also part of the, you see the ISIS and others are getting in the directly conflict, but it's really affecting the Syrian water supply and Iraqi water supply. And Turkey has built the dams. Amu Darya, Sev Darya rivers, that's in the Aral Sea. So, but Amu Darya comes from Afghanistan. So it's 5 stands in central and Afghanistan is +6. So these rivers are going to receive decreased runoff and increased demand. And they don't have any agreements. And these are the rivers which we have already witnessed conflict. What we can see that destroying the existing river water sharing agreements, these are the Mekong, Ganges, Indus, Jordan, Nile and Zambezi. These are the major rivers where we see that it might be difficult to, because of the flow variation will change, because of the climate change, that the existing agreements will not be good enough to continue. And these are the major international rivers affecting large number of people. Creation of new water conflicts which will take place in Central and West Africa and South America. Why? Because these are the basins like Congo basins or Volta basin in South Africa and Amazon and La Plata in Latin America. The problem is here, if you look at the projection, the climate change projections, these rivers will get more water in the next 40 years. And if you get the more waters, and these rivers have never been water scarce rivers, they have been always water, more, plenty. And then you get more. Then you need to have much more dams to be built if you want to, if you don't want to displace large number of people, that's lots of flooding will take place. So how you address this issue, that might create new conflict. This conflict in Central and West Africa, and particularly in the Latin America, will be on more water than the less water. But these rivers will be more on the more demand and less water. Why we will be worried? These are the countries doesn't, Korea, why Korea will be used, so what's happening in the, that's the same thing I need to, when I give this lecture in Sweden, they ask me, what was the problem? I mean, we have plenty of water in Sweden. I mean, we complain all the time of either it's raining or snowing. So why we will be worried about the water, which is, water scarcity or the water conflicts? But I think we live in a globalized world. There is of course, we do have, Korea has its own water problem. As if you look at it, Korea is categorized as a country with the water shortage, as the availability of per capita water is less than 1,700 cubic meters. That might not tell the whole picture, because the Korean economy is moving, the most economy becoming industrialized, then of course you don't really need that much of water. But if you look at it, among all the OECD countries, it's a serious water shortage problem among the OECD nations. So if you look at the per capita water availability among the OECD nations, Korea is the lowest one. And I was using 282 liters of water per day in 2000, and it's increasing every year because we are using more water in Korea than before. It's not that water, we have reached a limit of using less water. But that is not the water we are talking about. The real problem is the water footprint. The water footprint means what we call it, the water we import on other means, on the agricultural products, from the industrial products. And if you look at it, that is really, per capita, 1,1790 cubic meters. Half of this water is half of a swimming pool. It's a huge size of the water we usually import from the outside.
Wait, excuse me?
Yeah.
So that is per year?
Yeah. So this is the import of virtual water, and that is taking, if you look at it, South Korea is world's 5th largest water importer after Japan, Italy, England and Germany. So though we think that we are not really dependent on the water crisis taking place in the other parts of the world or the water scarcity, but if you look at our economy, it's extremely interlinked with the water availability, water use, water management in other parts of the world. We just cannot stay outside that. Yes, please.
What kind of product contributes the import of virtual water in Korea? Agriculture, because Korea is mostly export, the industrial goods and
Yeah. This is the whatever the clothes and other things coming in, the textiles and others, plus food products. It's a lot of agricultural products also being imported, and that's what the number actually. It is not exactly quite very different than, as I said, there are many countries in Europe those who are doing it. It's not necessarily bad. It's a necessarily good thing. Remember that we always think, oh, we are importing this much of water from there. But if your country is water scarce, it's a necessarily good thing that you are importing the products rather than using your scarce water yourself. Like take for example, Saudi Arabia producing wheats in the middle of the desert, or Egypt producing wheats in the middle of the desert, doesn't make any sense. You can really import that wheat from half a price, less water, green growth, from the other part. Why you need this? So I think it is not necessarily a bad thing. It is actually, the global economy helps it to less use of the scarce water in the place and get the water from the other place. But that also creates that we should be worried that water management, water development takes place in a much more peaceful, much more progressive way in other parts. So we cannot, it's a good thing, but at the same time we have to be careful, and we cannot just raise our hand saying that this doesn't affect us. It's a global issue. So, and the most of this, the virtual water which is coming from the Korea and this part of the world is also coming, and the most of the productions coming, the agricultural production from Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East and Africa. And I think that's what makes us interrelated with the, if it is not directly the conflict taking place in our part, but it makes us dependent on the water management in other parts.
What kind of virtual water do we import from Middle East?
There have been some fruits coming up there. There's been large food productions coming from the, the what do you call it, the bananas, sorry, not bananas, the oranges. There have been all, at least that's been to the rest part of the Europe, which also we import. How much you import from Israel?
What?
The agricultural products.
Not much.
Not much?
I think that's from the fossil fuel, because when they produce fossil
That's
fuel.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that
that's
would be the
right.
case.
Also, in Middle East they use a lot of the energy to produce the water.
That's
I mean,
right.
the desalination. So I think there is a kind of the direct impact.
Also, they use the water to extract the oil and gas in the Middle East. A lot
They're
of-
increasing more and more water now because of it is getting more, the energy is getting more effect, so that they need more water to use to get the oil productions there as well. So that is the amount. So that Korea at least is dependent on the outside water. So this is what makes it that look in a case, in a context, is a interdependent, as I said. So how shall we, this is the last slide, I will finish it up here. Because what is happening particularly that we do not, when we look at and we are getting engaged, and I think the Korea is getting engaged in a more business manner, but also once you need to get engaged in other parts of the world, which many of the Asian countries are getting engaged in Africa and in the Middle East. Then we have a policy differences because we do not include the development policy with the foreign policy, because we look at the development policy separately. Particularly, it's a problem which is taking place in the West, that our development aid doesn't match with our security precautions. Whose development, whose security, we look at it. And unless you correlate that, you try to match your effort bringing regional peace and looking at how the development can be in that part of the world, then we will not be successful. Our region, bringing peace in the basins will not be successful if we are not creating a sustainable development pattern. And I think that's where the foreign policy and the aid policy has to come together. Not the diplomats only approach, because in most of these international water negotiations, we are always dependent on our diplomats. But the diplomats lack. The diplomats have to negotiate all kinds of issues. And the water negotiation is quite complex. And the water negotiation, particularly in the context of climate change, has become much more complex than what it used to be before even. So what will happen if there is something that takes place on the water issue? The diplomats are either not interested, so they keep it, this is not the thing, because we don't able to understand it. But if we do understand it, we don't want to address it the well as much as, because we don't really understand it. So I think it is the water sharing, taking into its importance and taking its the challenges which the world faces, the diplomats need the support from those experts. And so how do the foreign, there have been, most of the foreign ministries are now opening up to this because they realize this is the challenge, and particularly climate change has brought that change. That the number of experts, those who really understand it, are helping out the foreign ministry to do this. Engagement at the highest political level, which is very important because that is a mistake. The West or the developed world has done it because we talk to the water ministers in the different countries, and we think we have got the countries agree to this. But if you look at the country politics, water ministers don't come really in the upper level of the political decision making. They come much lower. Main guy, president or prime minister or military chief or whoever is that, depending on which country we are talking about, and then the three guys, the foreign minister, the defense minister, and the finance minister. So, water minister doesn't really, he might or she might, most of the cases, they come there, they usually try to be nice, toast with the foreign delegates, agree to it, but when they go back, none of these agreements really work. I will give an example. Just 5 days back, Uganda organized this Nile head of the state meeting because there is a big problem going on, particularly Ethiopia and Sudan are not taking part. So everybody in the beginning, water minister said, our presidents will come. So, Uganda booked all the 5-star hotels for the presidents, everything was arranged. 5 days before the meeting, half of the presidents said, we are not coming. Because they have not been taken to confidence, because the water minister has told them they will come. They are not come. And once they don't come, the negotiation will not go, because it's a very specific, water negotiation has a huge political stake, and unless whoever is the highest political level, we are not engaging them, we just cannot address this issue at the water minister's level. And comprehensive strategy for mutual benefit sharing. Water is not water. Water is much more than that. Water is food, water is energy, water is development, water is industry, water is the survival of the nation. So if we look at the water only as a water, then we are really not really doing the justice to the water, and the situation is getting more and more complicated. So I think we need to look at a comprehensive strategy. Then we'll find at least answers to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you again for the very compelling lecture. It was really informative and awakening, even scary. So we would have about 25 minutes for a Q&A session or interactive session. So I would welcome any question. When raising your question, please identify yourself. Okay.
Jennifer Chang, sole correspondent from Press TV.
Okay.